And you are joining us for our guest curator talk with Dr. Deborah Willis. We're so excited. Thank you for joining us. Just a couple quick notes. The program is being recorded. So if you are not comfortable with that idea, you can go ahead and turn your camera off, but you will not be recorded. Only speakers are recorded. Also, we will have a Q&A portion for this program. It will be at the end of the talk, but you are welcome to use the chat box to type your questions as they come to you. And then we will keep track of those questions and use them at the end in the Q&A. And it looks like we are all connected to audio, and my name is Jessica Sundstrom. I'm so excited to see everyone. I am going to turn it over to the Kalamazoo Institute of Arts Executive Director, Belinda Tate, and I hope y'all have a great time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Good evening, everyone. As Executive Director of the KIA, I have many privileges, and tonight I am very grateful for having the honor of introducing Dr. Deborah Willis, Curator of Framing Moments, Photography from the Kalamazoo Institute of Arts. I first reached out to Dr. Willis a few years ago to discuss the idea of curating a show from our collection, recognizing her expertise as a curator and scholar, and really what that would mean for bringing more context and understanding to our very important but lesser known collection. I could not be more impressed with the selections that she has made. The show looks fantastic. As an artist, scholar, and curator, Dr. Willis is indeed one of the most fluent voices in the field of photography today, and we are fortunate for her thoughtful investigation of our collection. In Framing Moments, her fresh edit reveals an exhibition teeming with insightful content and technical mastery. The show is stellar, it's moving, it's profound, and it has a delightful rhythm between well-known and emerging artists. It offers tremendous insight into history and culture through photography. Dr. Willis developed her expertise over many decades of work in this field. She received her BFA from the Philadelphia College of Art, MFA from the Pratt Institute, MA from City College of New York, and PhD from George Mason University in Virginia. She is the recipient of awards from the MacArthur and Guggenheim Foundations. She served as curator at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture at the New York Public Library and the Center for African American History and Culture at the Smithsonian Institution. She taught at Duke University and the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill, and then joined the faculty at the Tisch School of the Arts at New York University in 2001. Among her 20 books on African American photographers and Black photographic imagery are Reflections in Black, A History of Black Photographers, 1840 to the Present, Posing Beauty, African American Images from the 1890s to the Present, and Black, A Celebration of Culture. While that's a very impressive history, another reason to celebrate Dr. Willis tonight is to honor her birthday this week. Before COVID, we would have given you a warm Kalamazoo style, extra special birthday welcome. But on this Zoom call, it will be impossible for you to hear our thunderous applause in the same way. So just know that we are generating a lot of great birthday welcome energy for you this evening. And I hope the flowers we sent to you will bring you joy in the days to come. And now, without further ado, I cede the floor, the Zoom call, to Dr. Deborah Willis. Welcome.
Thank you, Belinda, Jessica, and Rahema, and the Kalamazoo Institute of the Arts. It's really exciting to be here and to celebrate with you. We had planned this a while ago, and to think about coming to, spending my birthday in Kalamazoo. I was looking forward to a trip. So it's really exciting. This invitation meant a lot to me because it offered me an opportunity to look at a broad collection. So it's amazing. There are 96 works in the collection, in the exhibition, and it's 96 years ago the museum started collecting photography. So it's like a nice synergy and connection to the number 96. This, as I worked on the exhibition over the past few, I guess, year and a half, started thinking about how to tell a story about collections and photography collections in museums, but to think about how collections speak. They speak the language of the community. They speak the language of artists. They speak the language of the curator, as well as the people who are entering into the museum. So how does the collection speak? So that's what I wanted to start the exhibition. I wanted to think about how photography has formed ways of looking. And so coming up with the title, I wanted to think about moments, and moments which include faces and places, the theme, the land, the street, and social justice that we can connect to today, to also to Ansel Adams' photographs, the artist as subject, as well as finding meaning in the object, which means abstraction, which could mean a range of ideas. I'm going to walk you through the exhibition and talk about some of the ideas that really generated and excited my imagination as I thought through this exhibition. This is, so bear with me for a moment as I share my screen and not my terrible board. And let's see. So in the beginning, just to think about ways of looking and ways of sharing this exhibition. The exhibition looked at not only portraiture, but also acts of social protests, and also looking for ways to identify subjects. Entering in this exhibition, we're, the first photographs you'll see is the image here on the right, and you'll see Matthew Brady and his studio, the Matthew Brady studio, of a photographer taking a photograph of a couple. And let's see as we walk through this. It's always a moment. We have titles for the different sections, spaces and places. And as I mentioned, it is composed of idealized portraits, also photographs of activism and social justice, also private moments and thinking about life and spirituality. What do we think about leisure life and beauty? What do we think about the inner self? And as we walk through this exhibition. So entering into the studio, we first enter a 19th century moment where we see photographer directing a young couple. It excited me to see this image in the collection because we all know Matthew Brady through his photographs of the Civil War. And yes, he has photographs in the collection of portraits of Civil War generals as well as presidents. This to me humanizes him in a different way. And I wanted to just kind of have the energy of this moment where we see a young couple from the 19th century, where we see fashion, we see a moment where the pose is telling a story about love and the permanence of love or the permanence of a relationship. We also see that the photographer creates a studio with art on the wall. And that's another way of experiencing how the photographer is experiencing the moment of 19th century photography. James Van Der Zee is also in this section. And just to let you know, the images are not on the wall presented chronologically, but in terms of what images speak to each other. They're in conversation with moments. The first couple, the couple in the car, James Vanderzee, well-known photographer in Harlem, photographed a couple in 1932 in their car, fur coat, Cadillac, brownstones in the back. So we begin to see community. We see the importance of possession. And as I imagine the couple in telling their story, that imagine if this image was sent to a family member in the Caribbean or in the South or out West, to imagine life in Harlem. Here we are, we've arrived, we're safe, we're living life, we're living the good life. But we see the style, we see the imagination of the couple, and we see a future. If I received that photograph in 1932 during the Depression, a sense of hope. There's a collection of the heiress in this collection as well. Vanderzee photographed a woman who inherited an apartment of a woman that she worked for in Harlem in the 1920s and 30s. These are 3 scenes, and I just wanted to show the different ways that Vanderzee was able to create a monument to the previous owner, but also to celebrate the current owner. And we see her as the heiress. We see the piano, we see the jewelry, as well as the furniture and the way that her life is presented. The 3-folded mirror and the satin, silk, and lace that we walk through this experience. So Vanderzee is allowing us into a home of Harlem, into a home of a woman who's created a narrative about her life and invited the photographer in to help guide her story. And here's Vanderzee. This is not in the collection, but I just wanted to show his face and his time during his time, but also others walking into the studio on Lenox Avenue. August Sander, another photographer in the collection, and also well-known, 1930s, working at the same time in another country, in Germany. And these are circus workers, artists, and a moment that he captures them at rest as they're taking a break. But we see an integrated couple. We see an integrated group. We see women who decided to take an action about their artistry, that they've decided that as opposed to living a life in their hometowns, that they wanted to travel to the world. And traveling the world meant becoming a circus artist. And here we see one woman who's up in the back in the doorway. He framed nicely, about to take a bite to eat. The woman at the bottom of the steps, just looking directly into the camera. All of them feel that energy that Sander brings to their narrative of moving through the world. We see fashion, we see workers, we see people just kind of looking through the lens of their future. And Dorothea Lange's photograph of Migrant Mother, another 1930s, another life. California, the Depression, a mother raising children, and the moment that she's captured. What's happening here, this has been relationships over the years connecting to Madonna and child. We see a mother in terms of independence and dependent. We see different relationships over the years through the scholarship of this image. And to recognize that the Kalamazoo Institute of Art has collections that are vast, that are in some of the major museums in this country and around the world. And here's an installation shot of as we enter into the gallery. Different ways of looking. We see Gordon Parks next to the image of Dorothea Lange. Gordon Parks also working in the 40s in Washington, D.C., one of the first Black photographers to be hired for the Foreign Security Administration photographs, photographing not only this woman, Ella Watson, but photographing in the community of Washington, D.C. He wanted to photograph injustices and how to express that best. And this is one of the first photographs that he made that was not was not published during its time period because the director, Roy Stryker, said, "You will get us all fired in terms of this." But he wanted to create an iconic moment referencing Grant Wood's image, but also referencing the hard work of this woman, Ella Watson, who was raising her grandchildren and her adopted daughter. Her husband had been deceased and she lost a daughter. So we see a broom and a mop. We also see the American flag, and framing that, the seriousness with the pin that closes her dress talks about her modesty. And that's something that is presented in this image here. Bill Brandt, as we think about workers, domestic workers, the parlor maids in England, and also the maid in the office building, government office building in Washington, D.C. We see the uniforms of these young women, one younger, one older. We see the framed table and made up table, wine, and we see the sense of class and the experience that he, the photographer, British photographer, is presenting within that narrative. Diane Arbus in 1964, Flower Girl at Wedding. How do we work through this mist? It's a beautiful image of a young girl who's lost in the midst of this moment. She's the flower girl. We don't see the experience of the wedding, but we know from the title. We also know from the basket that she's holding. And to find a way to connect that to the exhibition, wanted to share how we are installing the show, how we installed the show, but to have ways of walking through photographers who were well known in the larger pantheon of photography, but also in the local photography history of Michigan. And their images here on the wall. Shelby Lee Adams, a Texan photographer who was photographing brothers praying in 1993. The gesture in this image warms my heart as we begin to see the connection of the two men. Their heads touch, the Bible is open, they're praying, their praying hands, and their sense of hope has not been lost based on how the photographer made this image. Image by Dulce Pinzo of Catwoman, Minerva, wonderful moment of energy of a nanny. So we see three workers during this exhibition, from a chambermaid or a charwoman, as Gordon Parks describes Ella Watson, to a nanny, to the parlor maids. And we see the different style of dress. We see the uniforms of the time, but we also see this wonderful moment of a woman who works as a nanny and in that experience. Another installation shot, as you'll see. Andy Warhol is also in this exhibition, The Little Red Book. He had a few little red books that he created Polaroid images in a bound album, small bound album of friends, musicians, and artists. And they exchanged photographs. They moved the camera and shared with each other moments of their relationships. And these are some of the images from that album. Lawrence Saltzman, a photographer in Philadelphia, and we see an aspect of this hand. What does this hand mean? Is it a sense of hope or resilience? Is it praying or stop? So we have a way of looking at this image through multiple experiences through Lawrence Saltzman. And the image on the left in the frame of this exhibition is the pedestal where the Andy Warhol's images are placed. The land, the street, and social justice. This increases, we can have, as I think this exhibition stretches in many ways, when we think about the land and the environment, the stories behind some of these images, as well as framing this, we're also looking at migration and the mundane activities of everyday life. Bernice Abbott, 1935, and Newsstand. we look at this newsstand, we see a lively community. We know it's in Midtown Manhattan. We know it's a business area, but we also see workers, men and women moving through the community. But there are a lot of women on the cover of these magazines. So we see this place where women are objectified, explored, and identified as beauty and as subject, but also challenged and enduring this moment of how they are read. On top of, you can have a sundae, you can have a malted milk. And so the exchange of conversations, you can have sodas, but here we see the world through the magazine world, we see the news of the world. We also see light fiction and theater stories in the framing of this image. And Winston Link's steam locomotive, 1950s, an image that became really popular to study in the 90s in an important way of looking at this as a storytelling moment of migration, but also of transportation. We see the industrial age as we see the workers. We see the importance of this image as a way of transforming the moment of a still image, such as this image in 1938 by Walter Rosenblum, gypsy children playing cards on Pitt Street in New York. Again, the stoop, the front stairs, the sense of play, the sense of community, and then the recreation, but the cards and the joy and the way that Rosenblum photographs the lighting. He's captured the joy on the child's face, and then the experience in the 1940s with Ansel Adams. And this is Clearing Storm, Clearing Storm, the Mount Williamson, Sierra Nevada. And this is about Manzanar, California. This is where men and women, American-born Japanese and first-generation Japanese families were moved to, imprisoned into concentration camps in this area. This powerful image, you know, when I studied this image, no one talked about the experience of the people who moved there from California, who had to leave their homes. They talked about the lighting, the rocks, this whole experience of the sky. And this is, in terms of injustices, in terms of learning photography, teaching photography, and trying to understand this moment, that Ansel Adams understood the importance of what this image meant to the people who were dispossessed, who lost their homes. And he donated the collection to the Library of Congress in 1965, explaining the purpose of my work was to show how these people suffering under a great injustice and loss of property, businesses and professions had overcome the sense of defeat and despair by building for themselves a vital community. Here we see in this image. And so this is, he presented this collection of images to the Library of Congress so that it's not lost. So that narrative is there. The Kalamazoo River. I really thought it was important also to think about place and to look at place through the image of Mary Whalen. This is 2013 and 8x10 tintype. So we see in a contemporary experience of how do we look at the 19th century to bring the life of a river that's been around for years. But here we begin to see a contemporary photographer and artist who's involved with looking at beauty and preserving that beauty. The beauty of Walker Evans in similar ways. It's how he's looking at Bourbon Street in New Orleans, entering into a space of perfection as this barbershop. We see the stripes. We see, as I mentioned, the experience of Bourbon Street we know today as joy, joyful, playful, artistry, and we see the exchange in that way. Marion Post Walcott, 1941 in Picnic in Sarasota, Florida. Just these range, again, Marion Post Walcott, Jitterbugging in the Juke Joint in Clarksdale, Mississippi. And these images are next to each other. in that section. Part of that section also is Charles Moore's photograph of Martin Luther King, his arrest in Montgomery, Alabama in 1958. Again, as I wanted to tell the story through that lens of injustice, but also beauty and hope, is the way that Dr. King is not resisting arrest, but he is pushed, thrust against the banner, the table there, but his hat is not jostled. We see this moment as a moment that transforms his understanding of self and citizenship. Gordon Parks, photograph of Malcolm X in Harlem, outside of the Liberation Bookstore, and we see this Arthur Michaud's the Michaud bookstore in Harlem on 125th Street. I'm thinking of Oscar Michaud, who was a filmmaker, but they have the same last name, and it's just, very unusual. So he photographs and understands the history of Back to Africa movement. He's talking about the present day, 1963. We know 2 years later, unfortunately, he is killed in Harlem. And looking at the crowd, we see Dick Gregory in the crowd to his left. We see dignitaries in Harlem, writers, activists. But the background of this sense of the history of people who have been denied their history. But this bookstore was central to telling the story of Black people worldwide through centuries. They have paintings of Ethiopia, Liberian leaders, Egypt, Sudan, connecting the global aspect of Africa, Ghana, Cameroon, Togo, and the Congo. So these were heroes through this experience of independence movement in the 1960s and in late 50s, and activists began to study the independence movements in colonial and post-colonial Africa. In terms of our aspect, we're at the same time experiencing segregation in the South. As a young woman receiving her voter registration card, the pride that she presented through the photographs of Ernest Withers. We see she's holding her card, she's making a decision about her future. We can connect it to today in the way that the experience of voting happened over the past year, and how young people had difficulties voting, Black people, people of color, and older people. So we began to see the importance of voting and the experience through the lens of Ernest Withers. His image here, I Am a Man, in 1968. This also is a collection of people who are denied their humanness, that being human, because 2 men died in a sanitation truck a few days before. Dr. King was in Memphis at the time to talk about this march and to talk about the injustices of these men and how they died. And this is the march where men were walking around saying, I am a man. And this is a powerful statement for grown men to remind the government, to remind the city that they are human. And the woman on the left, she is one of the organizers of this. And it's really fascinating. I gave a talk in England one year, and I met a student through that talk, and she's writing her dissertation on this image, but focusing on the woman on the edge of the photograph. So there's so many stories that we can find as we look through these images. Danny Lyons photographing in Texas the prisoners, to Shirin Neshat, Rapture series, Women in Line. Patrick Nagatani, just in terms of iconic places, the Rocket Lounge, the color, the experience of 1980s, the excitement of the camper, the children looking at these moments of photographic moments. And Dawu Bey also looking at history, looking at the experience of the Underground Railroad, how to relive it through a contemporary lens. He's photographing houses that he researched and cities that he researched that housed and protected Black people who were enslaved, who were leaving the South for freedom. And this is one house here. There's an exhibition. In the exhibition, there are a group of 6 images in the collection, and you'll see. And it's at night, so he's creating these images at low light, and we begin to imagine people who, to allow us to imagine people who live through this trauma and making it to the north. Artist as subject. So these are images of photographers and artists, writers who were documented by an array of photographers. Karsh photographing Georgia O'Keeffe, the profile, and we see above her head, we see the moment that he captures in here. Walter Gottlieb's photograph of Duke Ellington, a wonderful image of the interior of a dressing room. Ellington, always known for his well-dressed, well-coiffed look, but also there's a photograph of Ellington pinned into the mirror. So there's a reflection of saying, yes, check me, and I'm checked. So there's that moment. But also look at the ties, the joy that this composer and musician who understood what it meant to be the ambassador of music for this country. Diego Rivera's photograph of Frida Kahlo and Emmy Lou Packard in their love of relationships and friendship. He's captured that moment. Irving Penn, Truman Capote in 1948. Again, an image in the corner, how he's created this cornered image of a writer and how he's able to just imagine that story. And as we move through, we see image is of contemporary image of Renee Stout, other artists in this last section, finding meaning in the object. So through capturing time and objects and body parts, we see work, we see the framing of abstract moments. 1962 image. Imagine this, Chicago, this is West Germany. There's an image that relates to this in the exhibition that's about abstraction through Chicago's landscape and cityscape. Nathan Lerner's Eye and String. We see, someone who's interested in science and eyes and the light and the abstraction of light and how we see. Eva Rubinstein's finds image of a bed and mirror. How do we imagine this poetic moment? The mirror, the sheet, the white sheet, and the light that filters through the room. Sheila Pre Bright image here is Cotton from the Invisible Empire series. Images of women, busy fingers, to Anthony Aziz's image here of interior spaces. We can see cave-like spaces, but lighting and how as we move through this series. Holly Roberts, Woman with Baby, 1991, a wonderful way of exposing stories about womanhood, maternity, and objects that we see that are obscured because of role playing. Sheila Pre Bright's photograph of plastic bodies. We have 2 images in the series of the reimagined Barbie. To this image in conversation with the images, David Leventhal's image of Barbie at the beach, 1999, untitled. How do we see this? That he creates these miniature with large 20 by 24 Polaroid images. And then finally ending with Lorna Simpson's photograph here as we think about how we are measured and what stories are told through the body and these odd experiences. So the relationship of the exhibition, as we flow through these 96 images, we'll see multiple stories from different experiences that vary and in the way that we read American photography, photography from Europe, but also there are a number of images that I would have loved to incorporate it in the show that shares the relationships that many of the photographers felt about how to think about society from their time period, what was going on in their lives. But I also wanted to show the impact that the photography collection and how the curators and educators over the last century looked at photography to create a way to imagine narratives that we see throughout the years and through their lifetime. So just to open up now for questions.
Well, thank you so much, Deb, Dr. Willis. I've known you for so long, and this has been such a pleasure. I was listening to you talk and got more and more excited as you went along. I'm sure there are some questions out there among our viewers tonight, but I know that I want to know, how did you narrow it down? Like you narrowed it down. We have almost 950 photographs, and we gave you access to all of those. And I'm just really curious, just to start people thinking, before someone types in their question, if you could just kind of address, like, how did you come down to these 96 images from out of 950?
Well, because of you. I sent you 225 images I wanted to put in the extra.
That's true.
But it was difficult. It took months to go through, and to I didn't think of the themes at the time. I wanted to be in conversation with the images. So I as I love the idea of a mood board now. This is the language and the lingo of the young generation. We used to have pinup boards. Now they're called mood boards. So I had a mood board created in my office where I, cut up some of the images and place them on the wall to see what images worked, what lasting images. And there were photographers who I wanted to keep, who were working in the 19th century. But I also wanted to think about how to look at a 21st century audience walking through the exhibition, a large exhibition, and some of the images that I had to edit out in terms of in my mind, because I wanted to keep the cohesiveness of the exhibition. When I think of the earlier images, specifically, I would have loved to have images where people could spend time looking at them, but then there were small moments where I decided to just move it through and narrowing it down to a way to tell the story through the lens of the vast aspect of the land. And so I started with portraits and the land, and thinking of that dynamic. I wanted to look at movement, people who have been objectified, people who have been loved, people who have been removed. And so all of that I wanted to weave into the story. But then also the images of Ernest Withers, where he's photographing musicians. And some of the musicians had effect on my life and my lifetime, but also had a broader effect on the many people who will see the show. So we see music as a signifier to unite. And I felt that was important. So in terms of uniting the 96 images that I ended up with, I looked for ways for them to tell different stories, but also stories that people could appreciate through their own experiences.
Okay. Well, I have a bunch of questions that people have come up for you. So, and actually my first question, someone had actually put that in. So I'm glad that we were able to answer that for someone in the audience. Okay. In looking at the KIA photography collection, did Dr. Willis find anything that specifically sets it apart from other collections she has worked with before? And then how does it compare or relate to other art institutions that might be more well-known? It's a good question.
they're in direct comparison. They're moving the same pace, same speed. I curated a show for the Henry Art Gallery in Seattle, Washington, and some of the images are in that collection, distinctive collection. I've used the MoMA collection and the Met's collection for Chicago Art Institute's collection for my own research for other projects. Same, that they're on par in terms of the number of the names of the well-known photographers in the collection. And so I highlight and I take my hat off to the curators who understood the importance of collecting the named photographers. But I also am moved by the fact that the photographers, the curator of photography at the KIA over the years collected local photographers. Michigan was an important part of the collection. And that was a way for me also to present images that shared the moments that happened, that photographers who were photographing in Chicago, because I had a large number of Chicago images that connected a lot to the images visually to the images in Michigan. And so I wanted to make sure that I paid homage to the images that connected to the local area and respect the photographers of that area. Some people are still with us. Some people are in this loop tonight. And so that was really important for me to be a part of that.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so someone wants to know what's next for you.
Birthday?
Yes, birthday. Absolutely. That's the next.
That's the exciting part for it. I am also working. I have a new book. It's out. It's entitled "The Black Civil War Soldier: Conflict and Citizenship," and it was just released 2 weeks ago, New York University Press. And so that's been as you know, when you reached out to me, I was in the midst of that research. That was a 10-year research project. And I have spent a lot of time with working on that. So I'm spending time with that. I'm teaching, of course, and working on my own photography. And the two major projects that I'm working on is the idea beauty has been a central theme in my work. And so I'm working on closets. I'm photographing people's closets. And once I'm able to travel again, I will be reaching out to people in different communities, because I thought I would have a chance when I was in Kalamazoo. Rehema knows how I feel about shoes.
That's true.
But I find it reflective of answers to people's desire for identity. And how do we recognize who we are? How do we preserve ourselves in terms of our closets? When my husband helped me out with some of the photographing some of the people that I photographed over the past 2 years, he said, well, just ask them what's the best piece that they like in their closet. I said, everybody likes everything in their closet. You know, they can't wear them anymore, but they love everything in their closet. That's why we have closets. And so I also, in following that, and that's not only in pursuit of beauty in that project, but it's also in pursuit of the memories that are found in those closets that really bring beauty to the heart and mind of people who preserve these objects in their closets.
Yes. Okay. I'm kind of glad that maybe I miss getting my closet, because I would be in trouble maybe with my husband. Okay. I'm going to get on to other business. This is the next question I have for you is, if you've ever been asked to curate an exhibition of Hank's work, Hank Willis Thomas, your son, and what would you add to the discussion of his work? I think you and Hank have been in a show together, actually.
Yeah, we were in a show that was curated. Progeny is the title of the show. We were in a show in Miami and in New York, and it was amazing because when we were invited by Bernie Steinbaum for the initial show, we had no idea that we were photographing similar themes. I had, at the time, had been photographing pregnant bellies and asking women and men to write about stories that sustained them either through their wives' pregnancy or through their own pregnancy from women of their families who gave them advice. And then I would put the words, place the words on the bellies, like, you know, just in terms of being wise, and what do you tell that unborn child about survival?
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, Hank was working on a video project, Tell Me About Your Birth. We had no idea that we were doing the same thing. And he was photographing his friends,
Mm-hmm.
and they told these, you know, the mothers who tell the horrid stories of childbirth and how their head was just disformed, or why someone looks the way that they look is because their mother was in horrible labor. So here we were working on similar projects, same story, but we entered it differently. And I had a 225 words that people sent to me.
Wow.
You know, one person said that if you argue with a smart person, you'll never win. If you argue with a stupid person, you'll never stop.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, so and he was a person I was on a panel with, and I was doing that, arguing with someone who didn't hear me, and he wrote, my grandmother said, so he wrote that to me. And then it was like, oh, that's why I'm not stopping, you know, because I was like trying to get my point across. Those are words that we live by, you know. One grandmother told a woman, always have a candy man. You know, can you imagine your grandmother telling you? You know, and, and then another man said his grandmother told him is protecting him. These are words of protection. You know, you can't carve wood, rotten wood.
Mm.
You know, chilling words.
Mm.
You know, I just got a chill when I still remember when he said that. And so these are things that I think that make us human, you know. And so Hank continued on to do other projects about humanity with his Question Grids project. He works in collaboration with others. And I'm amazed at the projects that has brought to fruition. If I curated a show of his work, I love the way that he looks at still photography that creates into three-dimensional forms. Mm-hmm. So I would love to have an opportunity to curate a show about looking at still photography into a three-dimensional format.
That's interesting. Yes, definitely.
Thanks for that question, because maybe I'll present it one day.
Listen, I'll be ready for it. I definitely would love to see that come out of a collaboration between you two. Mm-hmm. Okay, there are two questions that are really similar, and then I have something else. And then it says, is there or are there any one or two images that really stood out? And if yes, which and why? And then I feel like the second question is very similar. It says about having a favorite work or a unique discovery within framing moments. So maybe we can combine those two to ask you if there were any images that stuck out and why, or a unique discovery.
Well, Shirin Nishat's photograph, Raptured series, Women in Line. Mm-hmm. That's a series of women on the land. We can connect it to migrations today. We think about women in migration. We think of not only women in line, but women on the land and women who are protecting other people in their communities or in their bellies. And so that, how do we look at the land through that lens of rapture? And that image, I didn't know that it was as small as it was. I imagined it, huge. So that also guided me in terms of how do we think about identity, and how do we interrogate identity through a small image that you can barely see the women, and the women who are in dress and in this line. And so that's one image that I didn't know about. I was moved by. And the other is the image by Eva Rubinstein. That image of that mirror. It's poetic. It's just so beautiful, that white bed, that bedspread. I mean, not without a bedspread, but with the, possibly it could be a nightgown on the bed, the sheet on this barren bed. In terms of that moment, I love that image, and I probably saw it maybe 1-2 times in my lifetime, viewed it in that way. And that was a very quiet moment for me. And I really love those images. That was a nice rediscovery for me. And and so that's that kind of struggle that answering that question, because all of them I really like.
Oh, yes, no, I would definitely agree. I have to thank you, and then I'll get back to the questions, but I do have to thank you because with us working on the catalog for this show, Framing Moments, from the Kalamazoo Institute of Arts, working on the catalog that will be coming out very soon. We'll have it in the next, I hope in the coming weeks. It was really great to be able to reach out to some of the photographers that you selected. And Miss Eva Rubinstein was one of those people that I've been kind of going back and forth about her images about. She's really been a delight to get to know. So I have to thank you for that too. It says, there's another question. There are maybe 2 more questions or 3 more questions. It says, what images, oh no, do you have expectations about which of these images will stick with us after the talk?
No.
No.
All should. I think they all should stick with
They
you.
should all, yes, yes.
I think that they all should have a moment, that you should all have a moment with these images like I had. I had longer, but I think I would encourage you to see the show when the catalog is available, and just really spend time with it. So I don't want to guide someone into pushing that story, but I really think that there are so many moments just to, think about. The fact is that Matthew Brady, we only know him through the lens of, popular people, celebrities, but here we get a chance to see Matthew Brady's studio of the everyday. So we celebrate the mundane in different ways. Even if we're photographing, like a photograph of Karsh's photograph of Georgia O'Keeffe, where she is posing with a skeleton bone over her head, but it's still a moment, a moment where she's in reflection. And I think that this is what happens when you walk through the exhibition, where like just moments that we have a chance to reflect on a time, a period, or beauty, or anything that sparks a memory.
And then I have another question. It says, what images or themes might you have included if you could broaden the exhibition? I know that's a good one.
Well, if the work, and this is something that you will have to do later on, new media. I would love to have had an opportunity to curate a new media artist, and so you're putting Rahima and Jessica and Belinda on the table to say, okay, we're going to have a budget to buy new media artwork. So that's a chance to talk about that.
Absolutely, I think so. And then I also just want to mention if there are, is there, what I think we have time for maybe one more question, but I want to mention that you also have another exhibition that just opened up at the Flint Institute of Arts called Posing Beauty in African American Culture. So hopefully people will be able to get up there. Flint is not that far from us, so it would be an easy drive if people wanted to see another side of your practice as a curator, because I think our show is very, very enriching, and I'm super excited about it. And I definitely know that all the books and shows that I've seen you do have been just, bar none. So I'm really excited to maybe have an opportunity to get to see another show outside of our show.
Well, I'm really excited about this opportunity to meet with your community and to share the experience of curating and creating a new narrative that expands the history of photography, expands contemporary photography practice, and to look at images that are rarely have an opportunity to be in conversation with each other. Photographers who aren't shown together. And it's really important to have that moment.
Yes, I think so. Thank you so much. I think everybody is saying lots of thank yous right now, and that they can't wait to see the show. And I can't thank you enough. And I am going to just say thank you, thank you, thank you, and hopefully we will get you here in Kalamazoo. I think we really do need to get you here, because I think we could maybe do another show, maybe a couple more shows.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And tonight, we thank you for attending our Zoom talk with Dr. Deborah Willis. She is an amazing curator, historian, artist, and professor. And we are really pleased to open Framing Moments Photography from the Kalamazoo Institute of Arts tomorrow. We will be open from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. and Saturday from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. So you can come and see Framing Moments for yourself. It is a gorgeous show, one of the best photography shows I've seen in a long time. And of course, it came from Dr. Deborah Willis. So,
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone. Thank you. And we look forward to seeing you tomorrow and the day after that, too, at the KIA.
Okay. Thank you.